Pepper spray really does work, but what worries me is people place too much reliance on it. It's like anything else. There's people that it just doesn't affect at all, and there's people that can fight through it. So you need to realize that it's not the end-all be-all, and you may spray somebody and they'll run off or just melt into a puddle of quivering goo. There's also a chance they may get really angry and really try to strangle you or stab you or whatever. Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Podcast US, brought to you by Guns Magazine. I'm your host, Brent Wheat, and I'd like to thank you for joining one of the world's biggest audio and video gun talk programs as we chat about the interesting stuff that makes up the world of shooting. Today, I'm joined by our official, unofficial co-host, Roy Huntington. So, hey, Roy, thanks for joining us yet again.
You bet. Always fun.
Well, today I came up with this idea, and it was sparked by being on the internet and seeing a paid advertisement, of course, for a self-defense slingshot. Yes, you heard that right. A slingshot that they talked about hunting with it and target practice, but, even a last-ditch self-defense kind of thing. And I thought, I've seen a lot of really bad ideas for self-defense, and I thought it might be fun to call Roy up, and we're going to talk about that. So I've got my list divided into two different kind of areas. One, which is just really bad ideas, and then we'll talk about the ideas that can be okay or awful, depending on the circumstance and the situation and all that. So, Roy, I think this one's going to be kind of fun. And I know, you've been in the shooting business even longer than I have, and you've seen your share of things, but let's talk about the slingshot right out of the gate. Now, I think before we start talking about the slingshot, I need to add that caveat of if a slingshot is all you have and you're in a lethal force situation, I suppose I might launch that steel BB into somebody's forehead if I'm capable of it, but 99.9999% of the times it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to work. But anyway, so we're not saying these ideas are absolutely positively horrible ideas, but they are most of the time. So anyway, Roy, am I wrong? You probably have a self-defense slingshot, or maybe a pair of them, left and right hip, and maybe a cross draw.
I guess if your name's David and the bad guy's Goliath.
This is true. Didn't even think of that.
And you have one of those sling things and you know how to do it. I saw those. There is a whole new generation of tactical slingshots and all these other things. And I saw one and that's fine. They're a lot of fun. You and I had them. I had them,
Yeah.
And you shoot, and you're really hard to shoot well, and usually you miss stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think the best one I saw was that it had a laser on it.
Exactly.
And so it's like, how does that work? So you've got the little rubber bandy thing that just moves all around, right? And then you have a laser that's pointing in some direction.
Well, I have a story about that. And I'm not sure. I don't think it's the same product. They've recycled, but like 15 years ago, I was at a SHOT Show with my friend Ken Campbell, who's the CEO of Gunsight, and Ken likes to argue. So we were talking to this person, and they were, I believe, Chinese, and English was not their first language. So they've said, would you like, I won't imitate the accent, but would you like to see this slingshot? And we're like, okay. Laser and hit where aim. So Ken says, so you're telling me regardless of what the projectile is or the distance, you just put that laser and it hits. They're No, that's not how ballistics works. Mm-hmm. I'm sure at 3 or 4 feet, that's probably pretty accurate, but they really, that was one of their main sell points. That you put that laser 100 yards away, that little rock or BB is going to hit what you aim at. And I will say, I don't know, 40, 50 caliber hard steel BB in the forehead probably would be lethal or close to, but, there's some other problems they don't talk about, which is reloading is really slow. As we've already said, aiming's pretty awful. And if you're not really accurate with it, which you're not with a slingshot, I wouldn't really put much faith in that. So, Roy, you probably made them out of Y-shaped branches and inner tubes, which I've done too.
Actually, I never did because
Really?
I looked at that and I said, well, that's crude and ridiculous, so I'm not going to do that. But I did do my share of, cut out plywood ones and
Yeah.
metal ones and a few. But all I really learned was that these are stupid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think earlier when you said if the only thing you have is a slingshot in a defensive situation, well, then you're pretty screwed. I'm sorry, man.
I think you just hit it right on the head, right there.
I mean, find a big rock, or run and hide and scream like a girl. I mean, it's like, let's be realistic here. You have some other list like a bow.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's next on my list, and this will inspire one or two hateful comments on YouTube. I guarantee it. I'm not saying I've taken deer with bows. A crossbow is really accurate and really deadly. I'm not saying that it's not, but let's stop and think about this, kids. The reason they used them, say, in the Middle Ages is that's what they had. That was the most advanced technology, but we have moved on from there. So again, if you're Burt Reynolds and a mountain man's getting ready to sodomize your canoeing partner and all you've got is a bow, okay, I get it. But planning on using a bow intentionally for self-defense just seems like a really awful idea that a few people are still in love with. So
well, and because I know what's going to happen, because we'll have bow fanboys, and all that. So I shoot a bow,
which seems odd, but yeah. Okay, I get it.
No, I mean I shoot a bow. I have an English longbow, and I really enjoy shooting it. Yeah. But it's certainly not the first thing I would pick up to defend my house. Yeah, I mean if I was out deer hunting and then was accosted by a bad guy who was determined to kill me, I would shoot him with my bow if I could.
Right.
Yeah. I mean unless I had a revolver in my pocket, and then I would shoot him with the bow, and then I would shoot him with the revolver. So
yeah,
I mean, it depends on the situation, but I think all these things we're talking about are last resort weapons. I know I've owned sailboats and other boats, and amongst the sailing community, flare gun as a defensive gun is very much a thing. Because, if you're sailing to Belize or someplace and you're technically not allowed to have a gun on your boat, well, then, I mean, I'm not sure I'd want to be shot with a 12 gauge flare gun, know. So it maybe if that's all you have, it's the merit. Actually, there is people where they used to, and they made an insert so that you could shoot like 410 shotgun shells in them.
Yeah.
I guess you were supposed to hide that on your boat or something, But again, it's a weapon of opportunity, I mean, you were talking about Kubatons and blowguns, and and there were some other things there too. I mean, even a big sheath knife.
Yeah.
To me.
Well, you're going ahead. You're running ahead of me, Roy.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
I was going to say the flare gun. I actually arrested a guy, and it wasn't for carrying the gun the flare gun because we weren't sure where that actually fell, but he carried a flare gun because he was a convicted felon, and his argument, and I don't know how it worked out, was that wasn't a firearm. Well, whatever. We hooked him up for, I think, warrants or something. But no, I'm like you. I've known guys that at least say they've carried them. I'm trying to think. I saw a YouTube channel. Not that you can absolutely believe everything on YouTube. Ha ha. But a guy fired one into ballistic gel, and it didn't go in, I mean, less than an inch, because they're not made to penetrate anything. They're basically a ball of burning sulfur and, typically like magnesium. And yeah, I would not want to take one to the face or the body or whatever, but saying it's going to stop somebody, they're not going to feel good, and they'll probably have to go to the burn ward. But unless they're maybe covered in gasoline, that's not really a good option. I would call it maybe a decent distraction device. But I was on a charter boat one time where a sailboat came in right behind us, and the captain pulled out his flare gun, and as he called them, ragbaggers. When they saw that and he was aiming at their big giant sail, they veered off. So I guess it does have a deterrent effect.
I never thought of that before.
Yeah. He said, back then anyway, this has been 30 or 40 years ago. Yeah, those sales will go up real fast. So they don't want to mess with that. So
I don't wait, but I don't know that a sale would go up too fast because
I won't. I don't
it's
know if it would either.
treated. I mean, yeah, it's synthetic. Maybe if you had a linen sale or something,
Yeah. But even then, those things are moving, a couple 100 feet per second, and they're shooting off sparks. But it actually takes a little bit of effort to set something on fire, unless it's doused in gasoline.
Because they probably would hit it and maybe just make a hole and go through it because it's essentially just really thin plastic.
Or bounce off.
Yeah, and there's got a lot of wind is going across the face of the sail. So but of course I wouldn't want anyone to shoot my sail. So
well, it worked as a deterrent in that one particular case on Lake Michigan near Michigan City.
Well, that actually brings up a quick thing. The commercial fishing boats, when I worked in Mission Bay on the police boat, they used to have these, they called them seal bombs. And so they're bigger than a M80 firecracker. And I guess you had to be licensed to actually get them. They said they were like the same as a quarter stick of dynamite. And based on what I saw, man, I could believe that because invariably in the harbor, the crew would be, playing grab ass with each other, and out would come a seal bomb, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen a few get thrown in the water, and it's like boom, So I know that there are people out there saying, "Cool, I'm gonna have to get some seal bombs and carry them for personal protection." No, you don't.
Well, and I'm sure we'll find a YouTube gun tuber that'll maybe try that. But something I didn't think about on my little list here is power heads or bang sticks. And I don't know this, but I think they've been implicated in either homicide or at least accidental death. Because if you don't know what it is, it's basically a shotgun shell or a pistol cartridge that's in a little thing that it's essentially a zip gun, and you're supposed to use them against sharks. And I don't think they use them much anymore because we're supposed to be kind and gentle to sharks and all that. But used to, that was the thing. I remember like in the 70s and even on TV shows, you'd push it against the shark and the cartridge would discharge and kill the shark. Which I'm thinking, okay, there's blood in the water, maybe bring more sharks. I don't know. But I don't think people use them much anymore. But I'm sure out in Mission Bay, Roy, you guys probably had bang sticks and all that. Any advice?
I did. I had.
Did you?
Yeah, I had a little short 357 Magnum bang stick, and the bullet doesn't kill them. The gas kills them.
Right.
The bullet just penetrates the skins for the gas. And mine was a little short stainless steel rod, and you wore it clipped to your belt. And it had a safety pin in the end of it, and which I was really happy it had, because I remember one day I was kind of climbing over some rocks and stuff, and I was stuck. I couldn't get over, and when I finally got over, I realized that the bang stick had turned around, was against me, and I was like pulling myself up over it. I know, I was an idiot, but I never used it on a shark. I did do it a few times just to see it go off, and it was pretty fun, because I actually at the time I thought, I don't think this is a gun. I wasn't sure that it was illegal to have. Yeah. And I would think that if you were a bad guy and you had a little short bang stick, that my gosh,
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to research and see if that's legal or not legal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the last thing, I've got two more things on my no. And I'm going to laugh. And I'm sure you've done this too, Roy, but the Kubaton, and I've still got mine around here someplace. It's the long keychain, basically, that it's a long stick. And those were a thing like late 80s, early 90s, that everybody had a Kubaton, and there was training courses. You could do this and that and hit them in the head and gouge out their eye and all that. And most people ended up hanging on to them, using them as keychains on duty, especially because, they're pretty big. You can tuck them in your belt pretty easy. Right. But I never used mine as an offensive or defensive weapon. And it just seems like by the time you go to all that, you might as well just go hands-on. But I'm sure you've probably tested them for ballistic coefficient or something. We had them, or you were allowed to have them, and I found a lot of those things, to me, are a lot of like the defensive holds that they taught you in the academy. They work really good if he kind of in the academy.
if he kind of doesn't want to fight anyway, Yeah. So when you put someone in a wrist lock, then it's like if he doesn't really want to fight, well, then that's a good excuse for him not to fight, right?
Right.
So he'll go with you. But the Kubaton, I tried a couple times to get. Drunk drivers have a propensity for staying in the car and holding onto the steering wheel when you tell them to
Right.
get out. And
Yeah.
so, we used to use them because you kind of like hook behind their thumb and twist their thumb off, and
Yeah.
then they would go, ow, 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 and then they would get out of the car.
Yeah.
We had PR-24 side handle batons, and
Right.
I hit a few people doing the flick 'em, where you
Hmm.
have it pivot, and it
Yeah.
had absolutely no effect on them at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And that's the thing too, when you're in a big fight, you think, okay, my
yeah,
instructor told me it's just
looks
gonna,
really cool,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
And
no,
you hit them and they're like, stop hitting me. It's like, oh, the fight's gonna start now.
yeah, they don't even notice that you hit them. It's really funny.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I did like about it though, and this is if you're going to carry a that kind of a side handle baton, is you hold it down to your side so the little short end pokes out forward. And I
Mhm.
do have to tell you, if you poke somebody in the stomach with that or
Yep.
anywhere, that gets their attention.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it's distracting to say the least. We
Yep.
also had the expandable batons. Remember
Yeah.
those?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I have to say I like that.
Yeah.
And
It's
if
just a stick.
it's just a stick, right? And
Yeah.
when I first got hired, we had, I don't know what they were, 20-inch oak,
Yeah.
batons, straight stick.
Beat
I
and
mean,
stick.
they were great because if you pull one
Yeah.
out, people look at that and says, "He's going to beat me to death with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to behave." But the Kubatons, or not Kubatons, I guess what were they called? Expandable baton.
Yeah. Expandable batons.
Yeah, I liked them because they were kind of, you wore it in a cross straw, little loopy holster on the front, and so
Yep.
if you were going to do it, it's like, okay, this guy wants to fight me. You'd reach across and then go
And
snap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they would look at you and go, he's going to beat me with that steel stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to stop. And
I'm
so
gonna quit now.
the few times I use it, is I found it to be most effective is if you crack somebody on the shin with it,
Mhm.
they pretty much would fall down on the ground and cry like a baby.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
but yeah, I think now that is a good, some of this might qualify as less lethal.
Yeah.
Because I am a strong proponent of that. If you carry a gun, you should also carry some pepper spray.
Yeah.
Because, the two guys fighting with each other who are kind of drunk, if you really feel it necessary to intervene, well, then pepper spray them because, chances are pretty good they're going to stop.
Yeah.
But again,
Exactly.
you're inserting yourself into this event and opening yourself up to liability.
Yeah.
So, just be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say, now I have used the PR-24. If there's a way, and I don't even remember how, but if you get it behind their arm, you can put their arm up right
Yeah.
behind them, and
Yeah.
they don't have any choice in the matter. That's pretty cool.
They have to
But,
kind of be cooperative, though. I mean, because it's
exactly.
all those things. If he's really in a fight, they're not cooperative,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, and you can pretty much
we tended to throw them away so they didn't get them and beat us with them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's true. It's not like the
Well,
TV at all.
Yep. The final one, and I've been guilty of this too, and you probably have too, Roy. Remember, and they're still advertised periodically, blowguns. I remember we all had blowguns, the 6-footer with the little darts and all that. And, we shot them into foam, and you wondered, I wonder how deep that would go. And occasionally you would see an ad, defend your home with a blowgun. It's like, really? If you believe that, there are far deeper problems going on than just purchasing a blowgun. They're kind of fun, and they're not really accurate out at any kind of distance. They don't hold their velocity very well, so they're just a toy. I guess unless you're an Amazon tribesman, but even then, yeah, they shoot the monkeys with them to hunt, but it's not like they hit them. It's not like the movies either. They don't hit them and then boom. It's like it takes a while for that poison to take effect. So, no on the blowgun. But Roy, I'm interested to hear I'm sure you've got blowgun stories.
If you do have a blowgun, though, you have to put, was it curare was the poison?
Right.
They always dip it on then you hope. Who here remembers in the back of like Mechanics Illustrated in the 60s and 70s, it was this guy with a big hat on and no shirt. He was holding a blowgun and he's holding an anteater up.
I
right?
remember that.
You remember that? Yeah. It says, have a blowgun, be a hunter, or, and all that. Yeah.
Yep.
It was really funny. He was like this really weird kind of gay, looking guy, or I don't
Yeah.
know, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're fun. Sure, I've made
Yeah.
some. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You go shoot at the hay bale or something. But
Yeah.
but no, that's not a real thing. I would say of all of those things, but again, it's a final resort. Would be some kind of a black powder gun.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, is it the primary thing you would rely on? Not me.
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, you've now walked into part 2 of the list, and this is the stuff that I'm not saying it's a horrible idea, but if you're making that your plan A, you're really not thinking this thing through. And black powder was one of them. I know guys have carried them because at least under the old state code in my place, if it was manufactured prior to 1897, it wasn't considered a firearm. I think they've changed that now. Basically, anything that shoots a bullet is a firearm. But back then, there was that exception for black powder. So guys that couldn't have guns because they were convicted felon would sometimes carry those. And as hundreds of thousands of people can attest from, the 18th and 19th century, black powder is quite effective, but there's a lot of shortcomings. We shouldn't have to explain all that. And again, but we're not saying, if you're out doing cowboy action shooting and, the tangos come over the back of the berm, that's what you got, shoot them. But, I don't know. And the late John Taffin did a story on that. And I thought, okay, he makes a lot of good and salient points about using it to defend yourself. But really the overarching question was, if you've got any other more modern type of firearm, this is probably plan B. So your thoughts on black powder revolvers and all that?
No, I agree. I think during black powder season, I know people who carry black powder revolvers, uh, ostensibly to put down a deer or something, but just as well, they carry them for protection. I mean, if you
Yeah.
really know what you're doing, you really know how to load them, you really know how to take care of them. I mean, they're pretty darn reliable, and and it is better than a sharp stick or a rock.
Right. Right.
Speaking of sticks, though, is that I'm an old guy, I have a bad back, and I've carried a cane now for, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. If chances are pretty good if I'm out and about during the day, I have a cane with me. And the one I usually use is an old, who are they called? The knife guys had the crazy guy started the company. Black, no, I can't, I'm blanking on their name now.
I'm not going to say, because you said the guy that founded it was crazy. So
Yeah, he sold it. He's out of it. But anyway, you know what I mean.
I got it, but I think most folks do too.
They call it like the urban gentleman's cane or something.
Yeah.
And it's got this, kind of heavy cast aluminum ball top to it. And it's just a straight stick, but it's some kind of like fiber impregnated fiberglass or something that's really good. Well, I drilled the bottom out about 10 inches of it, and I glued a brass rod in there and then put the cap back on. So it's got a little heft out there, right? Yeah. And
That's
so
funny.
I like it because it gives you a plan B. It's, I mean,
Right.
I'm armed, right? But if I'm like minding my own business and some guy wants to push me around or something, well, he's going to learn that stick fighting is really effective,
It is.
And and then at least that gets them off of you. So now you can run or get your gun out or do whatever it is you're going to do. But I think even if you don't have a bad back, I think seriously about having some kind of a gentleman's cane. And if your state allows it, remember there's sword canes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I carry a sword cane, but I took fencing when I was young. So
of course you did.
It might be surprising to somebody someday.
Well, I was going to say, I've got quite a bit of experience with walking sticks, and about the only time I carry them anymore is when I'm hiking. But our good friend Steve Tarani, who is literally a martial arts expert, he's most known for his karate training, but at one point, and I don't know if he still does it, but he taught a cane class. And I know a guy that had his whole family go through it. And when they went to Europe, where you can't carry basically any kind of weapon, they all took walking sticks with the idea that at least they had that. And I will say, in the hands of somebody that practices, or even a guy like me that just knows the technique, they can be used pretty effectively for a lot of different things. And the funny thing was, when I took his class, I thought, okay, we're going to learn all this real high speed, low drag stuff. And you do learn some of that, but Steve will tell you, if you're not practicing it, you're going to forget it. But I do remember one of the first things was swing it like a baseball bat. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, that works pretty good. If you hit somebody in the temple with it, it's going to put them down.
Well,
But
they go like this and you hit their forearm or something. Yeah. I
yeah,
found even those, they're expandable canes. You get them
yeah,
at like Walgreens, right?
yep,
They fold up and then you go flick and they go, doop, 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 right? They go straight.
yep.
Well, guess what? If you poke somebody with one, it's just like poking them with an aluminum rod, you
Right.
know, because they don't
Yep.
collapse. And so, yeah, when I went to Europe, I took one of those and never a second glance anywhere, right
Exactly.
through TSA, right through it. What's that? That's my cane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you're a gentleman of a certain age.
Well, yeah, that's it. I've reached that age where you don't have to take your shoes off or your coat off or anything, so that's good.
Yep.
Yeah, canes though, that really is a plan B or kind of a weapon defensive tool that really works. Plus, I have to say, it really feels good if you're stuck, following your wife around the antique mall for 2 hours. It's kind of nice to kind of lean on it every once in a while. Have you seen the ones they're like the British have? They fold out and have a little stool on them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I'm surprised you don't have one.
I have one of those. Yeah.
Of course.
They're Walgreens, $25. And
Yep.
they're a little ungainly to carry, but when I had injured my back 2 or 3 years ago, oh Lord, what a nice thing that was. And you could still hold it and use it like an axe and chop somebody if you needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, what I always felt like the cane was good for was keeping somebody off of you. If a guy is coming out with you with a pistol, you're screwed unless you've got a gun or whatever. But if somebody's got a knife or just being crazy, that's where they really come into being. Because like you said, you can poke them, keep them off. You can trip them very easily, or if you can use them as lethal force by, smacking them real hard in the temple or something. So I think you hit it perfectly on the head. That's a good plan B, And, I've seriously considered doing what you're talking about. I've reached that age where I think I could use a cane, and it does give you a few more options. So,
well, but people open doors for you. The only thing is I will caution you is that if you have a cane and you plan on using it for defense, I mean, find yourself a couple YouTube videos. You do need to learn how to take it back, because if you poke somebody and you don't poke them hard enough to knock them down or get them off of you, they are going to grab the end of your cane.
Yeah.
So now you're tempted to, it turns into a tug of war, which I don't know, you'll lose it or you won't lose it or something, but you have to learn how to break that hold. Right. That's really important. So do it, but take the 10 minutes and practice a little bit and learn how to break that hold.
Exactly. And now let's get into something that will certainly inspire some hate mail. And we've talked about it before, but I think this is one of those weapons, because I know many, 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 many people who do this. They carry a knife for self-defense. And now wait, before you're typing what a dumb SOB I am, knives kill people a lot. Okay. I get that. But the problem I have with knives, having taken multiple knife classes, again, Steve, is a world-class instructor, and I can't verify this, but I think Steve's got practical experience. Okay. So this guy knows what it's like. And it was funny. The very first thing he said in one of his classes was the first rule of a knife fight. And I'm thinking, he said, don't be in a knife fight. And I thought, this guy really knows what he's talking about. Steve teaches from the standpoint of, he can teach all the stuff and the moves, but he teaches you essentially to disengage, get away, and draw your gun, because that's what it is at this point. You need to go to a gun and you need to shoot this guy. So the plan B of getting in some kind of knife fight, and if you're a martial arts true expert, you practice blades every day and all that, that's a different deal. That's 0.001% of the population. Billy Bob, who's carrying his Bowie knife, granted, I don't want to go hands-on with Billy Bob because he might pull that knife, but that being your plan A method to defend yourself just doesn't make good sense to me. So your thoughts on knives, Roy? And I carry a knife every single solitary day. And if I have to use it, I will, but that's not plan A.
Oh, no, I agree with you completely. We used to carry, or a lot of us carried a folding knife in each front pocket when I was a policeman, and everybody had one in their strong hand pocket. But
Mm-hmm.
I used to carry two, and that was because if somebody pins your arms, right, you still can get to your knife probably in your
Yeah.
pocket, so you could open up and stick them in the thigh or do something, get them off of you, and then shoot them. So
Yep.
no,
Yep.
I'm with you. It's like a real plan C. I I did a little bit of light knife training one time, and it was what was his name? Yeah, he used to write for us, Janich, Michael Janich, I think
Michael
it was.
Janish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. So you put a white T-shirt on, and the other guy puts a white T-shirt on, and you get a blue marking pen, and he gets a red marking pen, and then you go. One,
Go
two,
to fighting.
three, start the knife fight. Well, what
Yeah.
in the movies where they go like stab, right? And then they jump back and then they run in and they stab again. I'll tell you what, these guys that know how to do it,
Oh,
if you're within distance, you get stabbed 15
you're dead.
times
Yeah.
and cut 10 times, right?
Yeah.
And so literally, I mean within 10 seconds, my shirt was pretty much covered with red spots and slashes and
Yeah.
and he had like three or four blue ones for me. I mean, I didn't even know what I was doing and I got him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
and so
that's Steve's point is in a knife fight, you're going to get cut.
yeah.
And one thing I always remember is the fillet move. Just think about that fillet move.
Ugh,
I don't even want to think about that. And to watch a
no.
guy like Steve do the karambit, I call it the ballet of death because, the karambit is the curved knife that you can spin on your finger. And he does it. And when he goes to speed, it's crazy because he'll slice both femorals, probably cut your chest, cut your neck. And then before you know it, you're going, and I'm out of here.
That's
So,
it.
like you said, guys that are good, but how many people are actually like that?
Yeah. It's interesting. If you not everyone has been shot by a gun, right? They're out there, but everyone has been cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this was taught in a couple classes I took that there are situations where presentation of the knife will make people go, "Whoa, wait a minute," right? Because they look at that and they go, "Ouch, I've been
Yeah.
cut. I know what that's going to do to me. I don't want that." Because how many times have you pointed your gun at a bad guy? Okay, I'm going to put your hands up. You're not going to shoot me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, a seasoned criminal who's been shot before,
Yeah.
he goes, okay, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to
We're not
get
gonna-
shot again. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so, I'm not sure how that works into things. Don't assume it's like the racking of the 870 shotgun.
Yeah.
Don't assume that's going to stop the fight. It might, right? But
Yeah.
so just because if you pull your knife out and go like that and say, get away from me or I'll cut you, it might work. It might work.
Yep.
And then at that point, you should run far, far and fast.
Yeah.
So,
And I will give you one technique that I used and I think about it a lot. I used to carry a neck knife, and
Yeah.
neck knives scare me because I'm afraid they're going to fall and because I don't want to be stabbed. I also carried a couple of different kind of knives on my duty belt. And my idea was I'm not going to go knife fighting somebody, but I had an instructor tell me that it's pretty effective if somebody tries to take your gun out of your holster. One of the best ways to deal with it is, I don't want to talk about disarming techniques, but push your gun down so that they have to struggle against all your weight. And while you're doing that, get a hold of that knife with your other hand and just go to stabbing.
Yeah.
And they'll lose interest in your gun pretty quickly. So that's not a bad idea.
Well, I learned because in the early days, cop knives were usually a buck 110 folder.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we weren't smart enough to understand that you could put a thumb stud on it to open it one-handed. So it was a two-handed opening. And yeah, there were guys that would you bend the spring and then you could hold the blade and flick it down. And sometimes it would open up, sometimes not. And so I was always thinking about things like this. And so I made myself a short fixed blade knife. It had about a 2.5-inch blade and a flapped little sheath for it. And that was on my duty belt. because then I knew that I could open it and use it with one hand. And it was both as a defensive weapon, but it was also a practical thing. So if I'm
Yeah.
holding on to this, spewing thing of gasoline or something, I could
Yeah.
get my knife out to do something and not have to let go of it. And so
Yeah.
I even did this is not really about, although I guess it is talking about what we're talking about. We haven't addressed the thing about a flashlight. And is a
True.
strobing flashlight really a defensive weapon?
Yeah.
Which I don't think it is. But anyway, a million years ago, this would have been in the middle 70s. No, policemen did not carry a spare light on their belt. It
Right.
was unheard of. Well, there were no lights until the mini mag. Remember the little tiny mini
Oh,
mag
yeah.
lights? Right.
I had one.
Then they appeared everywhere. And then somebody was smart enough to make a holster you could use on your duty belt. Well,
Yep.
I was a scuba diver. And so we had these little AA
Ike lights.
plastic. Yeah, tyke light. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That we used to use scuba dive. It was a backup light, right? And well, I was looking at it one day. I thought, you know what? That'd be pretty damn handy on my belt because we've all had our primary lights die or drop and get broken or something. And so I got one of those, and it used to have a clear end cap that shined light everywhere, and so I painted it black so that light just came out the end of the lens. And I made a little simple sheath and I put it on my belt. And it was really interesting to see the people berate me. Oh, what's that for? You afraid of the dark? And
Yes. Yes, I am.
yeah. But it's soon thereafter, mini mag lights came out and everybody had one on their belt.
Everybody had one.
So,
Yep.
But yeah, is the strobe flashlight a defensive weapon? I say no.
No, I agree. And that's a whole show too that we need to do. But one thing I wanted to cover real quick because we're about out of time is pepper spray, and I highly endorse pepper spray. I've done it to a couple dozen people probably in the course of my career. I encourage my wife, my daughters. I bought some for my mom. I encourage people to use it. But what I want to say about pepper spray, first of all, mace and all that's pretty much not a thing anymore. Pepper spray really does work, but what worries me is people place too much reliance on it. It's like anything else. There's people that it just doesn't affect at all, and there's people that can fight through it. So if you carry pepper spray, and I encourage that, but you need to realize that it's not the end all be all, and you may spray somebody and they'll run off or just melt into a puddle of quivering goo. There's also a chance they may get really angry and really try to strangle you or stab you or whatever. So that was my only caveat about spray. It works really good when it works, which is the majority of the time, but it's like anything else. It can actually make things worse. And the other part there is, we all used to have to be sprayed, and you always had about 10% of people that were, we don't have to get shot with our gun. Well, I do agree it's important because what happens, Roy, when somebody deploys spray? What happens?
If you use it, everybody is pepper sprayed now. Yeah.
Everybody. So you need, if you're going to carry it, you need to at least spray it in the air and walk into the cloud. And it's unpleasant, but you will survive. And it builds that confidence that if you are in a fight and you decide to spray somebody and you get a whole face full of it, okay, been there, done that. It sucks, but I'll fight through it. But if it's the first time, you're like, oh, I can't breathe, I'm dying. And that makes the situation worse. So pepper spray gets a thumbs up, but
we've both seen the, two transients fighting, and I used to just walk up on the beach because they were just spray them both.
Yeah.
Right. But invariably,
time out, guys.
They're still big, runny, snotty boogers, and they're still trying to fight with each other, and they can't see, and they're crying, and they're, no, I agree. This a thought just crossed my mind, and I think it might be something for people to think of, is that on police agencies, they usually have this, they call them a use of force continuum, or a use of force ladder, or there's all kinds of names for it. And basically what that is your final option is you take your gun out and shoot them. Right? But before that, you have other alternatives. And so maybe your first use of force is to try to defuse the situation, right? Okay, if that doesn't work, then you go to the next one. And maybe that's pepper spray, right? Then if that doesn't work, the next one might be an expandable baton. If that doesn't work, the next one might be some kind of a taser, perhaps, right? Well, now you're kind of out of options. And if you're still in trouble and this guy's still doing something bad, then you go to your final use of force. And now what happened though was that people, the public thought that we had to go through all of these steps every single time,
Yeah.
right?
Wait, firm, empty-handed control first.
I know. And so you have to learn that, let's say that if it's legal where you are, you're allowed to carry an expandable baton. Well, that's not a bad idea, right? Because they're tidy. You keep it under your coat. There's nothing wrong with that. You can use it to pry things open if you need to or something. But, if you have an expandable baton and some OC spray in your gun, well, that's pretty good, really.
Yeah.
And then that way, if you're ever in some situation to where, hey, you OC sprayed some guy that was trying to fight with you, and the fight stayed going, and so you got your expandable baton out and you cracked him on his shin, and he still wanted to try to kill you. Then if you go to guns, well, you've just painted a pretty good picture, of both of your level of responsibility and the fact that you did everything in your power to avoid, using deadly force. So, not counting running away. If you should have been running away is like number one, right?
Yeah.
But in the use of force continuum, number one is run away.
Yeah. And, interesting point. I know a lot of dignitary protection folks, and they hate the term bodyguard. To me, in the informal usage, a bodyguard's a big meathead who likes to push people around, and that's fine. And a lot of celebrities use them for status symbols more than anything. But true professional dignitary protection, whether it's government or private, a lot of them will carry spray, and a lot of them, you'd be surprised, carry a baton for that very reason. Because their first job is to get the protectee out of trouble and out of the way and out of the public spotlight and bad press, and get them safely away. But if they end up in a situation where they'd like to not necessarily go to guns, but this person's being really troublesome, they tend to shy away from spray because that overall contamination. But a lot of them carry a stick because, like you said, pulling the stick out, it's like, okay, don't want no more of this. And if the person still continues their miscreant ways, a quick wrap across the shins, or even up to lethal force if it's necessary. But it's pretty amazing. You never think about guys in blazers and earpieces. A lot of them are carrying sticks, expandable batons.
Well, it was always my experience that you could get, if you had a crowd and they were mad at you for being a policeman and trying to arrest this poor innocent person, well, you could get in close to somebody and poke him really, really hard in the breadbasket, with your stick, and they would just lose interest in everything. And then you could just quietly walk him over to your car and put handcuffs on. Nobody really knew what happened,
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's the beauty of that. So I guess if I was going to summate this, is that I would say don't make any stupid decisions. If you have a tactical black laser equipped with pin sights on it, slingshot, that's great. Go shoot some tin cans with it,
Yeah.
But be realistic. And I think giving yourself options, like less lethal options and all that kind of stuff. Carry a cane, carry a walking stick, because none of that's illegal, and that's all. Just think about it. It's not like on TV. It never is.
It is not. And the only point I would like to add is, especially when we're talking about this stuff, again, the stuff that actually kind of does work and has its place in the whole scheme of things, but everything, including firearms, nothing's 100%. So a thinking person will think, okay, I'm going to deploy my spray. I'm going to deploy this stick. I'm going to shoot them. But you got to realize there may be something after that. It's like, oh, just shot him. We've all seen that where you shoot a guy and he continues stabbing somebody or runs 100 yards. Nothing is 100%. So if you're going to have to defend yourself, first of all, don't get in the fight if you can avoid it. But if you have to defend yourself, don't plan on, I'll pull my gun and that's it. We're done. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, a great discussion, Roy. I had a lot of fun with that and thinking about some other stuff. So yeah, I'm like, oh, I want to go check that out. And my neck knife, I want to see if I've still got that around here.
Yeah, I have one of those. I have to say though, it was Clint Smith always said, I think it was Clint, I can't remember for sure, but he said the very best important thing to remember is that when you pull the trigger and shoot someone, that it's not going to work.
Right.
And I really agree with that. It's like, it's not, I saw a police video and a cop pulls his gun out, shoots a guy in the center torso with his 40, the massive stopping power of the 40 S&W, right? And this guy looks down and sits down on the curb, looks up at the cop and says, "Don't shoot me anymore."
Yeah.
And in the video I could see that the cop was like all but like went, what the hell? So,
when they look at you and go, "Why did you shoot me?" Oh, well, sorry.
Now that you bring it up,
Exactly.
All right.
Well, good. Yeah, good stuff, Roy. I appreciate you joining us for the Guns Podcast US, brought to you by Guns Magazine. Please make sure you go and check out gunsmagazine.com. We're still posting stuff there. I have a weekly story that I write, and over at AmericanHandgunner.com, Tom McHale's still contributing some stuff, so go check that out. And of course, you can watch this very podcast right there on the website, gunsmagazine.com. And of course, on YouTube, the FMG Pubs channel. And if you go to gunspodcast.us, that's our website for the podcast itself. We've got a lot of interesting stuff there, and a link to all the old episodes. So check that out, and merch and more. So on behalf of Roy Huntington, our official, unofficial co-host, that I got to come up with a better term than that. But anyway, on behalf of Roy, I'm your host, Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.
We'll be right back.